Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Island of Diego Garcia. The island of Diego Garcia is home to what some have called the most secretive United States military base in the world. It can be found in the middle of the Indian Ocean, used by U.S. forces as a launch pad for operations throughout the Middle East. The base is in territory previously owned by the British Empire. However, over the years, the island changed hands numerous times. These days, the only people allowed to know what's happening on the island are certified military personnel and the people who physically live there. Nobody else is allowed to step foot on the shoreline. The island is more secretive than Guantanamo Bay, leaving many to wonder what truly goes on inside the base on Diego Garcia. The history of the island dates back to the year 1599, when it was discovered by a Portuguese expedition, but the island was too small to be cared about, so it remained uninhabited until around 1800. Then, after signing an agreement with the British government, the US built a naval communication station in 1965. What they've done with it since is up for speculation. Controversies have been swirling ever since the late 1960s, when the locals were forcibly removed from the island. Everyone knew the military was up to something, but nobody was ever able to say what. In 2008, there were claims that the island was being used as a secret prison, a CIA black site. It was here where the US military allegedly held and tortured persons of interest outside the laws of the United States of America. The most recent conspiracy theory is that Diego Garcia is home to the missing flight MH370 that vanished in March of 2014. They say the military shot the plane down, recovered it, and then brought it back to the base. Although it's not exactly clear why they would do this. What do you think is happening in Diego Garcia? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And now for number 9. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Bill Evans and Marcia Shelley. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and join the family. Number 9. Ancient Athenian Base. A mysterious naval base from over 2,000 years ago was recently discovered submerged near the Greek city of Athens. The base dates back to 493 BC, when the Greek general Themistocles insisted the Athenian government fund a naval facility and build more ships to defend against the Persians. The Persians had attacked Greece a few years earlier, nearly defeating them at the Battle of Marathon. When they showed up a second time, they came by sea. However, it was thanks to Themistocles that Athens was ready with a huge fleet of ships and a powerful naval base. The Persians were humiliated and defeated, and afterward, they were sent home with their tails between their legs. It was a major world event that stopped Persian expansion into Europe. If it hadn't been for Themistocles and his idea to build a naval base, the Persians likely would have taken over Europe, and the world today would be a lot different. Now, after 2,000 years, a team of archaeologists believe they have found the remnants of that very naval base. Dr. Bjorn Levin from the University of Copenhagen and his team found ship sheds, fortifications, and other remnants of what may have been the biggest coastal base of the ancient Mediterranean. In the press release, the archaeologists said they found pottery, pieces of wood, and other vestiges of ship houses. These were buildings used to hold the massive warships that fought against the Persians in the Battle of Salamis, which took place in 480 BC. This is one of the most impressive naval discoveries in decades. The shipyard played a massive role in the development of the Athenian navy, which soon became the backbone of the first democratic society in Europe. Number 8. Mystery Volcano Base. Like something straight out of a James Bond movie, a mysterious air base recently appeared on a volcanic island off the coast of Yemen. Initial reports suggested no country claimed the airbase being developed on Mayoun Island, though it can likely be linked back to the United Arab Emirates. This isn't an ancient base by any means, but a newly built military installation at a crucial maritime choke point. Huge shipments of energy and commercial cargo move past the volcanic island on a regular basis. Whoever controls the airbase here can easily launch missile strikes into Yemen, and it can even serve as a main hub for operations in the Red Sea and East Africa. It was the Associated Press who obtained satellite images of the base in April of 2021. Within just a month, there was a 6,000-foot runway and 3 huge hangars that seemed to appear out of nowhere since there hadn't been any recorded activity on the island. Somebody built an entire airbase on a volcanic piece of rock, and they never even owned up to it. The base is just sitting there waiting to be used, potentially in some kind of surprise attack. Number 7. Lights near San Diego. During the summer of 2022, residents in San Diego were shocked by some mysterious lights spotted hovering in the sky. Dozens of these strange lights suddenly showed up, and people all over the city posted their recordings of the phenomenon on social media. There was no obvious indication of what the lights could be, and for a minute, it seemed like there might be an imminent alien attack. But then, the San Diego Police Department came to the rescue. The next morning, they told reporters with ABC News that the lights were flares being used for military exercises. However, when asked about the lights, the 2 nearby military facilities claimed they didn't know what they were. The Naval Air Station North Island and Camp Pendleton claimed ignorance to the light show, even as the police said they were confirmed by military officials. The lights hovering in the sky were just military flares, but they sure didn't seem like flares to the locals. The lights were seen floating over the ocean. Some of them were bright orange, while others were bright red. They were also seen blinking and pulsing in strange patterns. We still don't know what exactly happened that hot summer night. The lights were miles off the coast and burning bright enough that they must have been outputting a serious amount of energy. There are several military bases in San Diego, so there is the possibility the lights did come from an exercise. San Diego is reportedly home to about 60% of the ships in the U.S. Navy's fleet. Still, the whole incident was extremely suspicious. Number 6. Adak Island. Adak Island is a small landmass at the very edge of the border between the United States and Russia. It's a pretty miserable place in Alaska that's buffeted by hard winds and is almost perpetually covered in clouds, on top of being cold all year. It even has an ice-capped mountain called Mount Moffett, which stands almost 4,000 feet tall. The island has been home to the Aleut people for centuries, although nobody knows exactly how many inhabitants live there. The Aleut are native to the Aleutian Islands, first discovered by Russian missionaries in the late 18th century. The Russian missionaries converted the natives into Christians. Then the Russian traders established their own settlements on the island. There was a huge demand for fur, which the Aleut people could easily supply. But in the late 1700s, there was a revolt. The Aleuts fought back against the Russian traders who treated them poorly, but unfortunately, this only resulted in a brutal massacre. The Russians had far more strength than the native islanders, and as a result, a large portion of the Aleut population was decimated. The leaders were killed, and those who remained fled to smaller islands in an attempt to hide. These days, most Aleut are recognized as U.S. citizens. There are an estimated 17,000 Aleuts living in the U.S., with only 700 in Russia. Adak Island is only one of the places they inhabit, with the biggest settlement on the island having only about 300 people. The island was also taken over by the Imperial Japanese Army in World War II and was used as a military base by the U.S. all the way through the Cold War. In the 1990s, there were about 6,000 people on the island, but when the base closed, the island became a ghost town. That's why there are only around 300 people left, most of whom live an easy life of fishing on the northern point of Adak. Would you be able to live in the freezing cold weather? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe. Number 5. The Mare Island Naval Shipyard. The very first United States Navy base ever established in the Pacific Ocean was the Mare Island Naval Shipyard. It was built 25 miles from San Francisco in the small city of Vallejo in September of 1854. It soon became the most important naval facility on the west coast of North America. Throughout the 19th century, the Mare Island Naval Shipyard handled a huge amount of work from American, Japanese, and Russian vessels. The shipyard then continued to be used throughout the First World War. It was here where German forces may have sabotaged a gunpowder magazine containing over 100,000 pounds of black powder. The potential sabotage killed 6 people and severely damaged the site. Then, in the Second World War, activity at the base went through the roof. There was an ammunition depot, a hospital, testing lab, and even a school for firefighters. However, during the Second World War, the shipyard reached capacity. It was housing over 50,000 employees and simply couldn't get any bigger. After the war ended, the shipyard continued to be used, but at a much lower capacity. But eventually it was abandoned in 1996. The shipyard is still physically standing today, but it is now deserted. Number 4. St. Catherine's Fort. On St. Catherine's Island in Wales stands a 19th century fortification that was built by a committee known as the Royal Commission on the Defense of the United Kingdom. The fortress was constructed just in case the Emperor of France, Napoleon III, decided he would invade the British Isles. Lord Palmerston desperately needed to find a way to defend the dockyard and anchorage at Milford Haven. Any enemy force would easily be able to land their ships and attack the beaches. So, the commissioners came up with an idea for a string of fortified islands, coastal artillery that would devastate any invading force. However, only a single fortress was ever constructed, the St. Catherine's Fort. Work on the base began in 1867. It was a monumental task bringing huge blocks of solid granite from the mainland to the island. It took a massive workforce and would finally be completed 3 years later, but it wouldn't be for another 16 years before gun shields could be installed. The year after, the gun shields were officially declared useless and outdated. Plus, Napoleon never sent his ships, meaning the island never needed to be used for anything. It was such a hassle to build the first fortress that the government didn't bother with any additional ones. It basically became a complete waste of space, but it was used briefly as a zoo in 1968. Nowadays, though, the entire fort is completely abandoned. Number 3. Chinese submarine secrets. China appears to be expanding their power in the South China Sea. Recent satellite photographs have revealed what appears to be a giant submarine base slowly getting bigger. Images show that Yulin Naval Base, which is located on the tip of Hainan Island, is under construction. 2 new piers showed up on a chunk of newly reclaimed land, each one measuring between 500 and 800 feet long. These are entirely new, built seemingly in secret to house even more submarines in the South Sea Fleet. The fleet already has vehicles that can dive underwater undetected and are armed with nuclear ballistic missiles. The Yulin Naval Base is home to Jin-class nuclear-powered subs and smaller Type 093 submarines, which are also nuclear-powered. The Yulin Naval Base is one of the most mysterious in China. The facility was carved into the side of a mountain, making it impossible to see what's going on underneath the thousands of tons of rock. We have no idea what they're working on, only that the base must be full, because it's expanding outward. Number 2. Russia's Island Fortress. There is an island far away in the outer reaches of Siberia that was once home to a massive fortress. It's called Porbazin, and it was likely built by the Uyghur people around the 8th century AD. It was originally constructed to be an impenetrable fortress in the middle of a vast lake, but the fortress was abandoned at some point and was later converted into a monastery, only to be deserted again and burned down. The island was filled from edge to edge with stone, making the fortress look as though it was floating on the water. In the winter, when Lake Terekol freezes, you can walk across the solid ice to the ruins and step back in time. The island was completely blocked off on all sides by tall stone walls. Inside were a pair of massive courtyards, a single palace in the center, and smaller building complexes along the walls. The only way in was through a grand gateway, or of course, by crossing the lake. Porbazin was rediscovered in 1891, but at that point, nobody really cared about it. Fieldwork didn't start until Russian archaeologist S.I. Van Stein took an interest in 1957. Modern research wasn't completed until the late 2000s. Archaeologists now believe the fortification was the capital of the Uyghur Khaganate starting around 750 AD. However, nobody knows what happened to those who lived here, and it's unclear why the island fortress was abandoned. Maybe the people were scared away by invaders, or maybe they got tired of living in the center of a frozen lake. Doesn't seem that practical. Number 1. The Seeds of Death. Grunard Island is absolutely terrifying. For decades, the island was so dangerous that nobody was allowed access to it. That's because it was contaminated by mad scientists in World War II who carried out chemical warfare experiments, germ warfare to be specific. There's a reason Grunard Island is nicknamed Anthrax Island. The whole place was dusted in the lethal bacteria so that nothing could live on it. The experiments began in 1942. The Scottish Highlands were suddenly buzzing with soldiers carrying out secret operations for Prime Minister Winston Churchill. He and other world leaders feared the Nazis had already developed a devastating biological bomb. After the chemical warfare horror of World War I, nobody was ready to start messing around with chemicals. But if a bomb was to be dropped, Churchill wanted the British to have their own weapon so they could retaliate if necessary. So they found a remote island and started dropping anthrax on it. Nobody knew what was happening, although locals were a bit surprised that the sheep, cows, and horses began to unexpectedly drop dead. The locals were kept in the dark about what was happening on the island until the project was declassified 50 years later. In 1986, scientists finally decided it was time to fix the island. They sprayed the soil with formaldehyde and took all the necessary precautions, and luckily, after 4 years, Grunard Island was cleared of anthrax. Would you ever dare step foot on a place called Anthrax Island? Let me know in the comments. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!